Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The mythical battleship was real, and it came for Bloodforged Silent Revenge. Captain James Reed stared at the star map on the main screen of Epsilon 9 station. His eyes were tired after hours of searching for patterns. The bright dots of stars and systems glowed against the black background, but one particular signal kept drawing his attention. It wasn't supposed to be there. "Sir, I've got those old records you asked for," said Marcus Taylor, walking into the command center with a data tablet. The young intelligence officer looked nervous. Reed nodded. "Show me." Taylor handed over the tablet. On it were images of a massive battleship over a kilometer long with heavy gun placements and a distinctive arrowhead shape. The ship's name was clearly visible on its hull: Nemesis. "The Nemesis," Reed said quietly. "I grew up hearing stories about it. Everyone thought it was just propaganda, a myth we made up to scare the Krelok." Taylor shook his head. "Not a myth, sir. It was real, the most powerful ship humans ever built. But according to every official record, it was destroyed in the final battle of the Obsidian War 50 years ago." Reed scrolled through the images. "So why am I looking at recent sensor readings that match its energy signature?" "That's the thing, sir. It shouldn't be possible." Taylor pointed to a blinking red dot on the star map. "But that signal matches the Nemesis drive pattern exactly. It's been moving through the outer systems for 3 weeks now." Reed zoomed in on the signal's path. "It's heading straight for Krelok space." "Yes, sir. If that really is the Nemesis and it crosses into Krelok territory, we could have another war on our hands." Reed finished the thought. The peace with the Krelok Empire had lasted 50 years, but it remained fragile. The alien species had never fully accepted their failure to conquer human space. If they believe humans were sending a legendary warship toward their territory, they might strike first. Reed stood up. "Who else knows about this?" "Just Admiral Wilson. She's the one who ordered me to bring this to you." Taylor lowered his voice. "She wants this handled quietly. If word gets out that the Nemesis might still exist, there will be panic. Many people lost family in the Obsidian War." Reed remembered his own grandfather's stories about the war. The Krelok had attacked without warning, targeting civilian colonies with horrible biological weapons before the military could respond. Millions died painful deaths before the war ended. "What are my orders?" Reed asked. "Assemble a small team. Take the fast corvette Swift. Find that signal and determine if it really is the Nemesis. If it is," Taylor paused, "you're to make contact and prevent it from entering Krelok space by any means necessary." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Any means?" "Those are the Admiral's words, sir. The peace must be protected." After Taylor left, Reed began making calls. He needed a small team of specialists for this mission, people he could trust with a secret this big. 3 days later, Reed stood in the hangar bay of Epsilon 9, watching his chosen team board the Swift. The corvette was small but fast, perfect for catching up to the mysterious signal. Engineer Diane Powell was first to arrive, carrying a heavy bag of tools. She was in her 50s, one of the few people left who understood the old warship technology from the Obsidian War era. "Captain," she greeted him, "I brought everything I could think of that might help us interface with old systems. If that ship really is the Nemesis, its technology will be ancient by our standards." "Good thinking," Reed said. "The rest of the team is inside." Communications expert John Miller was already at his station when Reed boarded. The quiet man had an almost supernatural ability to decode and understand any transmission. "Miller, any luck picking up communications from our target?" Miller shook his head. "Nothing, sir. If it's broadcasting, it's using codes or frequencies we no longer monitor." Security Chief Alex Thompson checked weapons in the armory. The ex-Marine had fought in smaller conflicts with Krelok border forces. His face was serious as he looked up at Reed. "Sir, if that ship is hostile, we won't stand a chance against it. Not in this little corvette." "Let's hope it's not hostile then," Reed replied. "Our job is to find it and talk to it, not fight it." Navigator Owen Davis sat at the pilot station, plotting their course. He knew the border territories better than anyone, having mapped many of them himself. "Course laid in, Captain," Davis reported. "Based on its last known position and speed, we should intercept in about 4 days, assuming it maintains its current course." Reed took his seat in the command chair. "Then let's not waste any time. Launch when ready." The Swift traveled quickly through space, jumping from system to system as it followed the mysterious signal. Each jump brought them closer to Krelok's space and closer to potential war if they failed. On the 4th day, Davis called out from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up debris ahead. Looks like we've found the Gamma sector." Reed joined him at the view screen. The Gamma sector was a graveyard of ships destroyed during the Obsidian War. Neither humans nor Krelok claimed it. The debris field stretched for millions of kilometers, a perfect hiding place. "The signal is coming from within the field," Miller reported. "It's stronger now." Reed ordered, "Take us in slowly." The Swift moved carefully between massive pieces of destroyed ships. Some were human designs, others Krelok. All were silent reminders of the war's cost. Then they saw it. Against the backdrop of stars and debris, a massive shape emerged. Its hull was scarred with old battle damage, but there was no mistaking its distinctive form. The arrowhead-shaped bow, the heavy weapon mounts, and on its side, still visible despite the damage. Nemesis. "It's real," Powell whispered, staring at the view screen. "The legend is real." Reed studied the massive battleship. It had to be over a kilometer long, 20 times the size of their Corvette. But something was different. Strange modifications covered parts of its hull, technology that didn't look human or Krelok. "Sir," Miller called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Nemesis. It's an old authentication code, hasn't been used in 40 years. "Put it through," Reed ordered. A voice crackled over the speakers, old and tired but firm. "Unidentified vessel. This is Terran battleship Nemesis. You are approaching restricted space. Identify yourself immediately." Reed exchanged looks with his crew. After 50 years, the legendary ship was not only real, it was active and manned. "This is Captain James Reed of the Terran Defense Fleet corvette Swift. We're here under orders to make contact with you." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "Captain Reed, prepare to dock. Bay 4 is open for your vessel. The Admiral wishes to speak with you." As the Swift approached the massive battleship, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they knew about the end of the Obsidian War. The Nemesis wasn't just a legend or a myth. It was real, and it had returned with purpose. The small corvette Swift approached the massive battleship with caution. Captain Reed watched through the view screen as they neared docking Bay 4. The Nemesis was even more impressive up close. Its hull marked with countless battle scars that told stories of past conflicts. "Look at those modifications," Engineer Powell said, pointing at strange metal structures attached to the battleship's hull. "Those aren't human designs, and they're definitely not Krelok either." Security Chief Thompson checked his weapon. "Could be a trap. The ship might have been captured and repurposed." "Stay alert, but no weapons unless I give the order," Reed commanded. "We're here to make contact, not start a fight." The Swift entered the enormous docking bay and landed gently on the deck. Through the view screen, Reed could see that the bay was mostly empty, except for a few small maintenance robots moving about. No welcoming party waited for them. "Atmosphere readings are safe," Miller reported from his station. "Gravity and temperature normal." Reed nodded. "Powell, Thompson, you're with me. Miller and Davis, stay with the ship and be ready for a quick departure if needed." The three of them put on light armor, standard procedure for boarding an unknown vessel, and stepped through the airlock. The docking bay was eerily quiet. Their footsteps echoed across the vast space. The air smelled stale but breathable. Emergency lights provided dim illumination, giving everything a shadowy, haunted appearance. "This ship was built to carry a crew of 1,500, Powell said quietly. "But I'm not seeing signs of more than a handful of people." A door at the far end of the bay slid open. A mechanical voice spoke through overhead speakers. Captain Reed, please proceed to the command deck. Follow the lighted path. Blue lights began to glow along the floor, forming a trail leading toward the door. Could be automated, Thompson suggested, hand resting on his weapon. Reed led the way, following the blue lights. They walked through long corridors that should have been bustling with crew members but now stood empty. Some sections showed signs of damage, scorch marks on walls, patched hull breaches, and makeshift repairs. "This damage is old," Powell observed, running her hand along a repaired section. "From the Obsidian War, probably, but someone's been maintaining the ship all this time." After walking for nearly 10 minutes and riding 2 separate elevators, they reached the command deck. The doors slid open to reveal a large circular room filled with control stations and view screens. Unlike the rest of the ship, this area was well lit and fully functional. Most surprising of all, it wasn't empty. 12 elderly humans sat or stood at various stations. They all turned to look at the newcomers. Each person wore a simple uniform with old Terran Defense Fleet insignia, though the uniforms had been modified and repaired many times over the years. An old man with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard rose from the central command chair. Despite his age, he stood straight and proud. His eyes were clear and sharp as he assessed the visitors. "Captain James Reed," the man said in a voice that matched the one from the earlier transmission. "I am Admiral Thomas Walker. Welcome aboard the Nemesis." Reed saluted automatically, surprising himself. Walker's rank and bearing commanded respect despite the unusual circumstances. "Admiral Walker," Reed replied. "According to all official records, you and this ship were destroyed 50 years ago." Walker's mouth twitched into a slight smile. "Records can be wrong, Captain, or deliberately falsified." Powell stepped forward, unable to contain her curiosity. "Sir, how has this ship remained operational for 50 years without support? The power requirements alone should have." "All in good time, engineer," Walker interrupted, noticing her technical insignia. "First, tell me why you're here. Why now, after all these years, has the Terran Defense Fleet decided to look for us?" Reed explained about the energy signature they had detected and the ship's course toward Krelok space. As he spoke, he noticed the other elderly crew members exchanging meaningful glances. "So they sent you to stop us," Walker said when Reed finished. "It wasn't a question." "Admiral, if this ship enters Krelok territory, it could restart the war," Reed said. "We've had peace for 50 years. A harsh laugh came from a woman at one of the side stations. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and a jagged scar running down one side of her face. "Peace," she said bitterly. "Is that what they call it now?" Walker held up a hand and she fell silent. "Captain Reed, what do you know about the end of the Obsidian War? The real story, not the official version." Reed hesitated. "I know the Krelok attacked our colonies without warning. They used biological weapons that killed millions. We fought back and eventually forced them to sign a peace treaty." "And what about the Nemesis?" Walker asked. "What were you told happened to us?" "That you fought in the final battle and were destroyed, taking 3 Krelok dreadnoughts with you." Walker nodded slowly. "A convenient story. It made us martyrs instead of," he trailed off. "Come with me, Captain. There's something you need to see." Walker led Reed and his team to an adjacent room. It appeared to be a strategic planning center with star maps covering the walls and a large table in the center. The Admiral pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the table. "During the final battle, the Nemesis was critically damaged but not destroyed," Walker explained. "We were left to drift in an uncharted region. Most of our crew was dead. Our communications were gone. We had no way to call for help." The hologram showed the damaged battleship floating among debris. "The war ended while we were stranded," Walker continued. "We eventually managed to get basic systems operational again, but by then," his voice hardened, "by then we'd learned the truth. The Krelok hadn't stopped their biological weapons program, they'd merely hidden it." The hologram changed to show images of secret facilities and strange laboratory equipment. "For 50 years, we've been gathering evidence and preparing," Walker said. "The peace treaty was a lie. The Krelok have continued developing weapons that could wipe out not just humans, but all non-Krelok species. They call it Project Bloodforge. Reed stared at the holographic evidence, a cold feeling growing in his stomach. If this is true, why not take it to Terran Command? Because powerful people made deals with the Krelok, the scarred woman said, entering the room. They'd bury the evidence just like they buried us. Walker nodded. Captain Reed, we're going to destroy the main Bloodforge research facility. That's why we're heading toward Krelok space, not for revenge, but to prevent genocide. Reed looked from Walker to the evidence and back again. Admiral, I need to verify this information before I can. Of course, Walker said. Examine our evidence, talk to my crew. When you're satisfied, you can decide whether to join us or try to stop us. His eyes, though aged, burned with determination. But make no mistake, Captain Reed, one way or another, the Nemesis will complete its mission. Captain Reed spent hours reviewing the evidence Admiral Walker had collected. Files filled dozens of screens in the planning room. The more he saw, the colder he felt inside. These biological weapons, Reed said, pointing to images of laboratory samples. They're designed to target specific DNA patterns. The scarred woman who had introduced herself as Commander Voss nodded grimly. The Krelok can program them to attack any species. During the war, they targeted humans. Now they're developing viruses that can target anyone who isn't Krelok. Reed looked at Powell and Thompson, who had been examining the evidence alongside him. Their faces showed the same troubled expressions. How did you get this information? Thompson asked, his security training making him cautious. These appear to be internal Krelok documents. Admiral Walker pressed a button and a new image appeared. A map of Krelok space with several locations marked. We've been watching them for decades, Walker explained. After we repaired the ship enough to move, we used stealth technology to observe their activities. We've planted listening devices, intercepted transmissions, and occasionally, he paused, occasionally sent in small teams to gather physical evidence. With 12 people, Powell asked, looking impressed. How did you maintain a ship this size and run intelligence operations with so few crew members? Walker smiled slightly. Necessity breeds innovation, Engineer Powell. We've heavily automated the Nemesis. We've also incorporated technology from various sources we've encountered during our exile. That explained the strange modifications Reed had noticed on the ship's hull. Admiral, Reed said, why didn't you return to Earth once you'd repaired the ship enough to travel? A heavy silence fell over the room. The elderly crew members exchanged glances. Walker walked slowly to a view screen and brought up an old video recording. It showed a Terran official shaking hands with a Krelok representative. This is General William Hayes signing the peace treaty, Walker said. He knew about the Bloodforge program. Our intelligence shows he received personal benefits in exchange for keeping it secret. Voss spat on the floor. They sold out humanity for profit and power. We tried to send messages home, Walker continued, but they were intercepted or ignored. Eventually, we realized we were on our own, so we made a blood oath. We would not return until we could deliver justice, not revenge, Captain Reed, justice. Reed studied the elderly crew members. They had spent 50 years of their lives pursuing this mission. Their determination was both admirable and frightening. Tell me about the facility you're planning to attack, Reed requested. Walker changed the display to show a large structure built into an asteroid. This is the main Bloodforge Research Center. It's where they perfect the delivery systems for their biological weapons. Our plan is to destroy it completely. And afterwards, Reed asked. Afterwards, we'll transmit all our evidence to every species in the galaxy, Walker replied. The Krelok won't be able to hide anymore. Won't that just start another war, perhaps? Reed walked around the table thinking. Perhaps, Walker admitted, but better an open war than the silent genocide the Krelok are planning. Thompson leaned closer to Reed and whispered, Sir, if this is true, we need to inform Terran Command immediately. Reed nodded slightly. He turned back to Walker. Admiral, I'd like my communications officer to examine your evidence as well. He has expertise in validating intelligence. Walker hesitated, then nodded. Have him brought aboard, but understand, Captain, we're running out of time. According to our intelligence, the Bloodforged weapons will be ready for deployment within 2 weeks. Reed sent Thompson to bring Miller from the Swift. When they returned, Miller began a thorough analysis of the Bloodforged evidence. While they waited, Admiral Walker offered to show Reed more of the ship. They walked through corridors that gradually revealed the story of the Nemesis and its crew. We started with over 100 survivors, Walker explained, as they passed a memorial wall covered with names and photos. Time has whittled us down to 12. How did you survive out here for so long? Reed asked. We found habitable planets for food, salvaged materials from derelict ships, traded with frontier colonies using false identities. Walker paused by a window that looked out into space. But what kept us alive was purpose, Captain. The knowledge that we were the only ones who could stop this threat. Reed studied the old admiral's face. There was no hint of madness or blind hatred, only determination and a deep sadness. The Krelok used bioweapons on Colony 7, Walker said quietly. My wife and daughter were there. The weapons didn't kill instantly. It took days, painful days. His voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed old grief. Millions died like that, and the Krelok government claimed it was a rogue military commander, not official policy. But you found evidence that wasn't true, Reed guessed. Walker nodded. The Bloodforged program was approved at the highest levels. The attack on our colonies was just a test run. They returned to the planning room, where Miller was finishing his analysis. The communications officer looked up with a troubled expression. Sir, he said to Reed, I verified the data. The encryption patterns match known Krelok military codes. The biological formulas have been examined by the ship's medical AI and confirmed as weapons targeted at non-Krelok DNA structures. He took a deep breath. It appears to be genuine. Reed felt the weight of this information settle on his shoulders. If the Nemesis crew was right, billions of lives were at risk. But if they were wrong, their actions could start another devastating war. Admiral Walker, Reed said, making a decision. I need to transmit this information to my superiors. Walker's expression hardened. So they can bury it. No, Captain, we've stayed hidden for 50 years. We won't risk our mission now. You misunderstand me, Reed replied. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you of my intentions. My crew and I have seen your evidence. We believe it's genuine, but we have a duty to report what we found. Walker and Voss exchanged looks. And if your superiors order you to stop us? Walker asked. Reed met the Admiral's gaze steadily. Then I'll have to decide which orders to follow, the ones from my command or the ones from my conscience. After a long moment, Walker nodded. Very well, Captain. You may use our communication array. It's more powerful than your ships. But understand this. In 3 days, we'll be in position to strike the Bloodforged facility with or without your help. As Reed prepared to send his message to Terran Command, he knew he was standing at a crossroads that would determine not just his fate, but potentially the fate of all non-Krelok species in the galaxy. Captain Reed paced in the small meeting room aboard the Nemesis. 6 hours had passed since he sent his report to Terran Command. His message had included all the evidence about Project Bloodforged and the Nemesis crew's plan to destroy the research facility. The reply had finally arrived, and Reed didn't like it. They want us to stand down, he told his team gathered around the table. Admiral Wilson says they'll handle the situation through diplomatic channels. Engineer Powell scoffed. Diplomatic channels after everything we've seen. They don't believe the evidence is real, Miller said quietly. The message suggests Admiral Walker and his crew might be unstable after 50 years of isolation. Security Chief Thompson leaned forward. What are our orders, sir? Reed took a deep breath. We're ordered to disable the Nemesis if possible and prevent any attack on Krelok territory. A heavy silence fell over the room. And what are we going to do? Davis finally asked. Reed looked at each member of his team. That's what we need to decide together. Meanwhile, in the command center, Admiral Walker studied the tactical display with Commander Voss and the weapons officer, an elderly man named Robert Green. "The asteroid's defenses are stronger than we anticipated," Green reported. "They've added these gun placements in the last month." He pointed to several spots on the display. Walker nodded. "Can we still break through?" "Yes, but it will be riskier. We'll need to use the main cannon." Green's face showed concern. "That will drain our power reserves. We might not have enough energy to escape afterward." Voss's scarred face hardened. "We always knew this might be a one-way mission." Walker looked at the 12 names illuminated on a side screen, the last survivors of his original crew. After 50 years of sacrifice, they were finally close to completing their mission. But at what cost? Reed called for a vote among his team. "We have 3 options. First, follow our orders and try to stop the Nemesis. Second, join the Nemesis crew in their attack. Or third, stay neutral and let events unfold without our interference." Powell spoke first. "I've examined their ship modifications. They've created weapons systems specifically designed to target the research facility while minimizing wider damage. They're not planning a revenge attack against Krelok civilians. They're performing a surgical strike against a genuine threat." She raised her hand. "I vote we help them." Thompson nodded in agreement. "The evidence is clear. If we wait for diplomatic solutions, billions could die. I vote we help them too." Miller looked troubled. "But attacking sovereign Krelok territory violates every treaty we have. It could start another war." He shook his head. "I vote we follow our orders." Davis fidgeted with a stylus. "This isn't our fight. We should report back that the ship was gone when we arrived." He raised his hand. "I vote we stay neutral." All eyes turned to Reed. They were tied. 2 for helping the Nemesis, 1 for stopping them, and 1 for staying neutral. His vote would decide their course of action. Reed thought about everything he had seen and learned. The evidence of the Bloodforged program was overwhelming, but so was the risk of starting another war. Before he could speak, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. "Captain to the bridge," Walker's voice came over the intercom. "We have company." Reed and his team rushed to the command center. On the main view screen, a Krelok patrol ship had appeared at the edge of the debris field.